Breaking today, the final traces of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle from the British royal family are being erased, and this is far more significant than just the destruction of their former home.
And Charles is bringing in the bulldozers to bury any evidence that Harry was ever there. Why? Because the king is done. He's out. He wants to move on, and it's a very encouraging
Palace is a location that is fully under control of the monarchy. And what I mean by that is that Harry and Meghan can't just invite anybody in. They can't just run things themselves. They are held under the umbrella of the authority of the monarchy.
There is a small house on the Windsor estate that has been sitting empty for 3 years. 5 bedrooms. A copper bath. £2.4 million of British taxpayer money poured into its renovation back in 2019, when it was prepared as a family home for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. It has not been lived in since the summer of 2023. It has not been offered to another royal.
Charles has decided to completely remove all traces of Harry and his time at Frogmore Cottage, with seismic building work which is going to run into millions. And
it has not been maintained as a functioning residence. It has simply sat there, dark and empty, like a question nobody in the palace particularly wanted to answer. This week, the surveyors arrived. Not to fix it up. Not to prepare it for new occupants. To take it apart. To carve it back into the separate staff accommodation it was before Harry and Meghan ever set foot inside it. Bedsits for household employees. Small, functional, unremarkable. Every trace of the Sussex renovation undone, brick by careful brick, at a cost that will run into millions, paid, once again, by the same public fund that paid to create what is now being paid to erase.
The Betrayal book is when a very, very famous member of the British establishment, really a household name, is asked by the Queen to explain to Meghan before the wedding what life will be like. And that person goes to visit her every 3 or 4 weeks in Kensington Palace. And after the 3rd and 4th visit,
Frogmore Cottage is being demolished in everything but name. And the message written in the rubble is the clearest statement the British royal family has made about Harry and Meghan in years. There is no coming back. The bolt hole is gone. The last Sussex address in Britain is being handed to the Gardiners. Welcome back. Today we are going deep on what the Frogmore decision actually means, not just as a property story, but as a statement of intent from an institution that has spent 5 years absorbing blow after blow from the Sussexes' impatient, deliberate silence and has now, quietly and methodically, begun to close every door behind them. Let us start with what Frogmore actually was. Because a lot of the coverage of this story treats it as a straightforward property dispute, and it is considerably more significant than that. Frogmore Cottage was never Harry and Meghan's home in any legal or permanent sense. It was what the royal family calls a grace and favor residence, a property lent by the sovereign as recognition of royal service. You serve the institution, you get the keys. You stop serving, the keys come back. No tenancy agreement, no deeds, no claim. A loan against a job. That has been the arrangement for generations, and it was always the arrangement with Frogmore. When Harry's memoir landed in bookshops in January 2023 and laid out in forensic and damaging detail the private conversations, private grievances, and private family moments of a family that had given him everything, including that house, King Charles acted. A few weeks after publication, Harry and Meghan were asked to vacate. By the end of June 2023, they were out. The house has stood dark ever since. It is worth noting, because the record deserves accuracy, that Harry and Meghan repaid every penny of the £2.4 million renovation cost in full back in September of 2020. They are not freeloaders on that particular score, and anyone who tells you otherwise is flatly wrong. They paid it back. What they did not pay back, what cannot be paid back, is the trust they spent in the years that followed. The Netflix documentary filmed inside the property and broadcast to millions of people around the world. The memoir. The Oprah interview. The sustained and deliberate dismantling of the institution that lent them the house, the titles, and the global platform that made everything they built in California possible. That is the debt that has no repayment schedule. Now the same fund that paid to renovate Frogmore will pay to erase the renovation entirely. The sovereign grant, the public money that maintains the royal palaces, has just reached £132 million for this financial year, up by more than half on the previous year. The British public, which paid to create the Sussex family home in 2019, will now pay to convert it back into staff accommodation. There is a grim symmetry in that. Tom Bower, the investigative biographer who has followed this couple more closely and more coldly than almost anyone, described it plainly. The Sussexes have gone from the most talked about couple on the planet to a problem the firm simply wants tidied away. Bower is not a gentle analyst. His newest book, Betrayal, published at the end of March, is not a sympathetic portrait. And when he talks about what has happened to the Sussex financial position in the past 2 years, the numbers that sit beside his opinions are not comfortable for the Montecito household. Spotify gone, after a deal that delivered one series and ended in the summer of 2023 with a senior executive at the company publicly describing the pair as grifters. Not the usual language of an amicable business separation. The Netflix deal, reported at up to $100 million when it was announced in 2020, quietly downgraded last August into a far smaller first-look arrangement with no exclusivity. The same shape of deal the Obamas moved into once the novelty of their own Netflix partnership had worn off. With Love Meghan, the cooking show that was supposed to anchor Meghan's reinvention as a domestic lifestyle authority, landed somewhere around 389th on Netflix's own engagement chart for the first half of the year. Out of 7,000 titles. The follow-ups have not troubled the top of anything. In March of this year, Netflix walked away from As Ever entirely. The jam, the honey, the flower sprinkles, the candles, Netflix had been the commercial partner standing behind it, and Netflix stepped out. The brand said it was ready to stand on its own 2 feet. The first product drop back in April of 2025 had genuinely sold out within an hour, and credit belongs where credit is due for that. But the pattern, once you line it up in sequence, is a difficult thing to look away from. And then there is Invictus. Boeing, which had put real corporate money behind the games, has confirmed it will not sponsor the Birmingham event coming in 2027. The Australian government quietly declined to renew a $9 million commitment to Invictus Down Under. The chief executive of the Australian operation said his team found out about the budget decision minutes before the announcement went live. One income stream after another, drying up or walking quietly off the pitch. The Birmingham Organizing Committee has had its own instability, with a senior board figure stepping down altogether. This is the financial landscape against which Frogmore is being converted back into bedsits. Not destitution, Harry's personal worth remains in the tens of millions, and anyone claiming bankruptcy is overstating the case significantly. But contraction. Systematic, sequential, unmistakable contraction. A couple who marched out of the institution 5 years ago declaring they did not need it, watching from California as that same institution calmly and methodically closes every door they might have considered walking back through. The symbolic dimension of Frogmore's conversion cannot be overstated. For years, even among people close to Harry who understood the depth of the estrangement, the assumption persisted that Frogmore represented a kind of safety net. A bolt hole. If California ever went sideways, if the deals dried up, if the reinvention failed to deliver what it had promised, there was always that house in Windsor. Something with their name on it. A physical connection to the country Harry came from and the family he left. Something to come back to. That assumption is now being knocked down along with the plaster. Once Frogmore is converted, there is no Sussex address left in Britain. Not a corner of Windsor with their name on it. Not a spare room in a Grace and Favour property. Not so much as a key that fits a lock anywhere on the royal estate. The message is not subtle, and it was not designed to be. The institution is communicating, in the language of bricks and surveyors and conversion plans, what it has been unwilling to say in press releases or public statements. There is no coming back. The option has been removed. The fantasy is over. Tom Bower put it with a directness that provoked a formal response from the Sussex camp, and the fact that their own spokesperson felt compelled to respond to it tells you everything about how accurately it landed. Bower argued that the monarchy in fact depends on obliterating the Sussexes from public life entirely. Obliterating. When Meghan's team came out swinging at the book, they reached for that precise word and quoted it back in their statement, saying it was language that spoke for itself and accused Bauer of crossing from criticism into fixation. What they did not do was deny he said it. They confirmed the quote and objected to the sentiment. Which means both sides of the war are now on record with the same sentence. One believes it is necessary. The other believes it proves he has gone too far. Neither side disputes what was actually said. And then there is William. Because behind all the property decisions and all the financial contractions, the relationship between the two brothers is the weight that gives everything else its gravity. William is not a man given to public statements about Harry. He is methodical, patient, and operating on a timeline that extends far beyond the current news cycle. The public noise about what he might do to the Sussex titles the moment he becomes king should largely be treated as exactly what it is, commentary and speculation, not intelligence. The harder reporting suggests he may leave the titles entirely alone, viewing the Sussexes these days as a fading embarrassment rather than any kind of genuine threat. But the day-to-day reality writes its own story without a single word from him. William is photographed laughing with his children, carrying out his duties, working with the focus and the consistency that has characterized his public service for years. Catherine is recovering, traveling to Italy to receive civic honors, drawing crowds that fill public squares. The heir and his wife are doing the job. The spare, 3,000 miles away in California, is watching the last physical traces of his English life being quietly rearranged for the household staff. There is a detail in this story that deserves a moment of attention. When the palace was trying to find someone to take on Frogmore after Harry and Meghan vacated, they offered it to Prince Andrew. Andrew, who has spent years resisting efforts to move him out of Royal Lodge, his 30-odd-room mansion on the Windsor estate, looked at Frogmore and said no. He turned down the 5-bedroom cottage his own nephew had lived in. That tells you something about how the household has quietly come to regard the property. Bad memories and not worth the bother is how one royal source put it, with a plainness that palace communications do not normally permit. The cottage that hosted a royal family's hopes and was renovated for a royal family's future and then sat empty for 3 years while the royal family moved on without them is now to be carved back into the functional, unremarkable staff accommodation it was always meant to be. The copper bath will go. The bespoke finishes will be stripped. The 5-bedroom layout that was created for a family that lived there for approximately 10 months will be divided back into the bedsits that housed employees before Harry ever arrived. And the £2.4 million of public money that created it will be followed by further millions of public money to undo it. The taxpayer renovated it for them. The taxpayer will erase them from it. The institution is not tidying a cottage. It is closing a chapter. The question worth sitting with, as the surveyors begin their work and the plans are finalized, is not whether this was the right decision. It clearly was. The question is what it tells us about the moment the palace has decided the Sussex story has reached. Not a crisis requiring management. Not a rift requiring repair. A conclusion requiring documentation. A house to be converted, a name to be removed from a door, a chapter to be closed with the quiet finality that only institutions with centuries of practice in outlasting individuals can achieve. There is no bolt hole. Once Frogmore is flats, there is no Sussex address left in Britain. The firm is not angry. It is not vindictive. It is simply done. If this video gave you something to think about, please hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about the real story behind the royal headlines. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next video. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one.